Bright, unyielding light clouded my vision. I squeezed my eyes shut and groaned as I sat up. My head immediately began to spin and I felt the sudden urge to vomit. I turned, expecting to find the trash can that I kept beside my bed, but it wasn't there. Instead, I was greeted by a sight that nobody wants to wake up to. I found myself lying on a bench. I winced at the cool sensation that surged through me as I sat up and my feet hit the concrete floor. Faded green bars separated me from the office outside, where an officer sat typing away on his phone. Dread settled into the pit of my stomach, mingling with whatever nauseating concoction of drinks that I had consumed the night prior. I couldn't contain it anymore. My insides lurched, and before I had a chance to react, vomit erupted out of my mouth and spewed all over the floor of my cell. "Hey, come on now, boy. If you were feeling sick, you should have spoke up." The officer stood from his chair and approached, a deep frown stamped across his face. I coughed up one last chunk of undigested corn casserole and glanced up at the man standing before me. To him, I must have looked like a worm, a pathetic 20-year-old kid who couldn't handle his liquor. Normally, I would have spoken up, but in that situation, his cold stare felt warranted. "Look, officer, this must be some kind of mistake. You gotta be pulling my leg. A mistake. Think about what happened last night. Think real hard and then look me in the eye and tell me with a straight face that you think this is a mistake." My head throbbed, but nevertheless, I racked my brain trying to connect the dots. My memory was returning in fragments, random pieces that were sparsely related, yet eventually formed a clearer picture. I was out at the bar, Sullivan's, I think. I remember having a few cocktails. "A few," the officer interjected, raising an eyebrow. I sighed. "Okay, fine. I had a lot of cocktails, more than I should have. And then The breath hitched in my throat and a deep sense of guilt enveloped me. I lowered my head in shame. "Go on." "One of my buddies offered to drive me home. He tried to take my keys and I didn't like that. So I socked him in the nose. He got a nosebleed and I got kicked out of the bar. Everything after that is a blur. I promise, that's the last thing I remember." The officer snorted. "Oh really, is that it? You don't remember swerving off the road? You don't remember nearly hitting a family of 4? Well, you may not remember any of that, but it happened. You've landed yourself in a whole world of trouble." He spat, a burning disdain sizzling within his words. My eyes began to water at the revelation. What had I done? If what that man had said was true, then I was a monster, and for that I deserved to be locked up. I was ready to admit defeat, to await whatever punishment the judicial system had in store for me. But then I thought about my mom. I couldn't let her down like that. There had to be something that I could do. "Look, officer, I squinted, trying to make out the name on his uniform. "Officer Jenkins. There has to be some way out of this. Maybe I could work at the police department for free until I graduate, or I could do community service for the next 5 years or something. Please, you have to work with me here." Officer Jenkins scoffed. "I ain't gotta do nothing of the sort. You got yourself into this mess. Actions have consequences, son," he said, walking back to his desk. Tears blurred my vision. My life was officially ruined. I had a chance to make my family proud, and I blew it to smithereens. I was a failure in every sense of the word. A sudden burst of emotion flooded through me, and before I knew it, I was ambling up to the bars and nearly stepping in my congealing vomit. "Officer, I'm sorry. Please, I'll do anything to make this go away. My mom's been saving to send me to college since before I was born. I can't do this to her." Officer Jenkins glanced up at me. I watched as a devilish grin inched across his lips. My heart dropped. Something about that smile was deeply unsettling. Anything, huh? He replied, rising from his chair. Yes, anything. My confidence began to wane as Officer Jenkins approached the cell door. To my utter shock, he produced a key and unlocked it. Come on, take a seat. There's something that we need to discuss. I woozily followed him, acutely aware of the nausea still lingering in my stomach. I took a seat opposite of Officer Jenkins and anxiously awaited his proposal. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that same malicious grin plastered across his face. I felt like a mouse being cornered by a cobra. I've got an offer that may pique your interest, Jenkins said, that demented smile growing a little bit wider. I'm listening. If you pay me 10 grand by tomorrow evening, I can make this whole thing go away. All of it. It'll be like none of this ever happened. Any remaining hope that I had shattered into pieces. He had given me an impossible task and he knew it. And how am I supposed to do that? I'm a broke college student. Officer Jenkins leaned forward. He looked giddy, almost elated. His expression frightened me down to my core. I can think of a way, he said, sliding a flyer across his desk. I hesitantly glanced down at it, but I already knew what I would find. Spend the night at the Cromwell estate and earn $10,000. No strings attached. I gulped. Everybody in town knew about the Cromwell mansion. We were always told never to go there under any circumstances. The flyers were like bad omens. They appeared at random across campus, but everybody knew to either ignore them or dispose of them accordingly. Nothing good came from that place. I gulped, feeling my face go pale. Please, there has to be another way that I can get the money. This is a death sentence. 2 of my classmates went there my first semester and they never came back. I know I said anything, but if you got any bright ideas for how you're gonna come up with 10 grand in a day, I would love to hear them. Jenkins said, leaning back. It's either that or I leave you in that cage there and let the legal system do its thing. Do you know what the maximum is for first-time offenders? Depending on how nice the judge is feeling that day, you could face up to a year in the slammer, thousands of dollars in fines, and you lose your license for a full 365. Choice is yours, son. Is that really something you want? I stared at my feet, my eyes wide as dinner plates. My head spun and not from the hangover. I briefly mulled over my options before meeting Jenkins' gaze. Fine, tell me what I have to do. He nodded, clearly pleased with my answer. We ain't gotta do nothing yet, except for cleaning that crap up, he said, motioning to the mess that I had made. Fair enough, I sighed, turning back to the solidifying slop coating the floor of my cell. Where's the mop bucket? A full 5 hours had passed since we came to our arrangement. I spent about 30 minutes of that cleaning up puke and the other 4.5 trying to sleep off my nasty headache. Jenkins did offer me a glass of water and a stale piece of bread to help clear up my symptoms. I know his generosity is unmatched. By the time that I heard his voice call for me from his desk, I was itching to get out of there. I was still feeling groggy, but I had mostly recovered. And let me tell you, 5 hours in a cell with no form of entertainment is not pleasant. Boy, it's time, Officer Jenkins said, rising from his seat. Time for what? I replied, glancing at the clock on the wall. 20 minutes until 6. What do you think? He spat, glowering at me. If looks could kill, his would have been lethal. I groaned, standing from the bench. Well, lead the way. I followed Jenkins outside. I had never been so happy to feel the winter air nipping at my skin, but I didn't get to enjoy it for long. Officer Jenkins held the back door to a squad car open and motioned for me to get in. Seriously, I don't even get to ride in the front. No, quit wasting time. I pursed my lips, following his orders. Probably best not to piss him off and make him revoke his offer. And before I knew it, we were on the road. I stared out the window, a growing sense of dread gnawing at me like a piranha. The Cromwell estate was only a few minutes away from the station, but it was in a rundown area of town, which was part of the reason that everybody tried to steer clear of it. The more that I thought about it, the stranger it seemed. The town's population barely crested 1,000 people, even with the small influx of students that the college garnered. Why would anybody choose to build a multi-million-dollar mansion in a little backwater place like that? If I had known the answer beforehand, I would have taken my chances with a DUI charge. The sky was a vibrant mesh of orange and pink and purple as we arrived in the neighborhood. I had never been there before, but seeing it in person made the stories that much more unsettling. Every house had been torn down, each one leaving only an empty driveway to indicate that there had ever been anything there at all. Just being in the vicinity gave me a very bad feeling. So, what's the story behind this place? Like, why is the neighborhood abandoned? I asked, and we continued to roll down the desolate street. Rough area. Crime was so bad that nobody wanted to live here. The houses were a dilapidated eyesore, so they tore them down. Nothing more to it. The crime was that bad in a town this small. Isn't this the kind of place where everybody knows everyone? It just seems. I said, there's nothing more to it. I decided to shut my mouth before I screwed up any further. Jenkins' story seemed strange, but I didn't want to anger him more than I already had. After all, he was the one who had made the offer to me, which meant that he could take it back. The sun was beginning to set as we arrived at the front gate. A white brick wall separated the mansion from the outside world. Officer Jenkins rolled down his window and pressed a button on the intercom. It crackled to life and a deep voice bellowed from the speaker.
Password.
Promiscuity, Jenkins replied. He must have answered correctly because before I knew it, the gates creaked open, allowing us to enter. I pressed my face against the window, drinking in the scene before me. The estate was massive. Marble statues of figures that I didn't recognize littered the yard, the fleeting sunlight casting a golden glow on their smooth surfaces. The lawn had been neatly trimmed, and a wide array of flowers swayed in the breeze along the perimeter of the property. To top it all off, a grand fountain bearing intermingled stone angels stood in the center of a circular driveway. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had never been somewhere so upscale before. Well, here we are, and this is where you get out, Jenkins said as we rolled to a stop before the front steps. I kind of can't do that. You know, cop car. Jenkins grumbled under his breath before unbuckling his seatbelt and stepping out of the vehicle. He stomped over to my door and flung it open, a scowl scrawled across his face. Thanks. So what do I do now? Say that I'm here for the contest or whatever it is. Yeah, Officer Jenkins replied, that malicious grin returning to his lips. Good luck, kid. I watched as his squad car pulled away, kicking up a small cloud of dust in its wake. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage before ascending the mansion stairs. I rang the doorbell and took a step back, my heart thundering in my chest. I didn't know what to expect when that door opened, but it was definitely not the tiny girl who stood before me. This girl, if I can even call her that, was no ordinary child. Purple hair flowed down her knees and her teeth looked sharp as kitchen knives. But that's not what freaked me out the most, because sitting atop her head were two large horns. Dread swallowed me like a python as I stood there, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. The girl sniffed the air, her nose pointed upward like a wild animal. A spark flashed across her pupils and her grin grew even wider. Please do come in, she cooed, her voice as smooth as silk. You smell absolutely delectable. I was rooted to the spot, too afraid to move a muscle. The girl stepped back, opening the door wider. Well, what are you waiting for? What are you? I stammered, still in awe of her appearance. She scoffed as if I had just asked her the stupidest question that I could think of. I'm a lesser demon. Apparently, whoever dropped you off here did a horrible job explaining things to you. Yeah, I didn't really get any sort of explanation. I can see that. Come inside and I'll guide you to where you need to go. I took an instinctive step back. But you said that I smelled delectable. You're telling me that you're not going to eat me the second that I step foot inside. The demon girl narrowed her eyes at me. No, I'm not going to eat you. I could get seriously ill from eating raw humans, you know. Just get in here, I promise I won't bite. I scanned her up and down, ultimately deciding that she was telling the truth. I didn't know what lesser demons were capable of, but something told me that I did not want to get on her bad side. Alright, I believe you, but if you stab me in the back, I'm gonna haunt you after I die. Probably. Not how that works, but whatever. Now that you're inside, my name is Jezebel. It's a pleasure to meet you, she said, extending a clawed hand. I reluctantly accepted her handshake and immediately regretted it. For such a tiny thing, Jezebel had an iron grip. Ow, I said, yanking my hand away. Sorry, she grinned. A bad habit. Anyway, follow me. I did as I was told and tailed her through the foyer. I soaked in the view as I went, still trying to wrap my head around the fantasy land that I had found myself in. The inside of the mansion was just as luxurious as the exterior. A grand staircase with an ornate chandelier hanging overhead were the first things visible upon entry. Jezebel led me into what I assumed was the living room. It bore multiple extravagant sofas and armchairs all arranged around a gold-trimmed oak coffee table. A fire crackled in the hearth and I couldn't help but feel the sense of nostalgia. The entire place looked like something out of a movie. Just a little further, I'll explain how everything works and then you will begin. Jezebel proceeded to take me down a long hallway with a single door at the end of it. It was entirely black, including the handle, which was a stark contrast to the red carpet and white and gold wallpaper. What's in there? It looks kind of freaky, I murmured, a growing sense of unease eating at me. Oh, that's the waiting room. You still have a few minutes until the trial starts, and I haven't given you the list of rules that you have to abide by. After that's done, you'll be on your own. I gulped. A list of rules. Something about the way she framed that sentence didn't sit right with me. As I would come to find out, I was right to be concerned. Jezebel opened the door and ushered me through it. She followed behind me, turning the lock once we were both inside. The room that we were in was small. A single velvet couch sat against the wall. A digital clock loomed overhead, its angry red numbers perpetually ticking upward. Take a seat, Jezebel demanded, pointing to the sofa. I timidly did so, awaiting further instructions. Okay, listen up, because I'm only going to go over these once. Here are the rules for your trial. Hold any questions until after I'm done. I nodded. Got it. Rule 1. If you hear a loud roar from the depths of the mansion, hide immediately. The yeti does not play nice. Rule 2. Should you work up an appetite, you're allowed free reign of the kitchen aside from the clementines. Any morsel of food containing clementines is off limits. Rule 3. You will not be provided sleeping quarters. If you fall asleep for longer than 5 minutes, you will be disqualified from the trial and subjected to a penalty of Master Cromwell's choosing. Rule 4. Amidst your trial, you may encounter a girl named Dalia. Do not allow her to show you her writing under any circumstances. Rule 5. You mustn't remain in one location for too long. Once you begin, you will be hunted by the void. It is a slow-moving creature, but if it catches you, you will be met with a swift demise. Rule 6. If you are fortunate enough to encounter Master Cromwell before the trial ends, you must show the utmost respect. Failure to adhere to the rules will result in disqualification and possible penalties. You have been warned. Jezebel looked up from her script and locked eyes with me. She grinned, exposing her razor-sharp teeth. I hope you got all that because, like I said, I'm not going to repeat myself. I cracked a smile of my own and Jezebel's expression faltered. Yeah, I think I got the gist. Run away from monsters, only eat junk food, don't fall asleep, don't read anything, stay moving, and don't be an idiot. That just about covers it, right? Jezebel glared at me, clearly unamused. That's not. You know what? Yeah, you got it. Good job. She huffed, crossing her arms. Thanks. So now that I know the rules, is that really all there is to it? I just have to survive, and where does this void thing start off at? I feel like that'd be a good thing to know. Before Jezebel could offer a response, a buzzer sounded above me, nearly causing me to leap from my seat. Phew, that thing nearly gave me a heart attack. So, I glanced up to see Jezebel grinning again, a malevolent glimmer sparkling across her deep purple irises. The time for questions is over. Your trial begins now. Once she said that, the door swung open seemingly of its own accord, and Jezebel extended a hand, motioning for me to be on my way. I took a deep breath before standing and making my way over to the exit. I stepped back into the hallway and turned back momentarily. Hey, before I go. The door shut in my face before I had a chance to finish my question. Great way to treat your guests, I grumbled as I started my journey. I stopped to think for a moment before proceeding, whispering aloud as I formulated a tentative plan. Okay, so I just have to make it through tonight. Probably easier said than done, especially because I don't have my phone to tell the time. I could go upstairs first. Might be harder for that void thing to catch up to me that way. My stomach suddenly rumbled, interrupting my train of thought. Okay, never mind. It looks like I'm going to find the kitchen. I rounded the corner to the adjacent room, hoping to find what I was looking for, and I was greeted by another hallway. I sighed and shook my head. Of course, it's not that easy. I traveled down the second corridor, which left me with only one option. I turned left and was met with, yeah, you guessed it, another hallway. What's going on here? Is this house just one big hallway? Another 4 repeated incidents later, I was beginning to question my sanity. I had been down the same exact hallway about 7 times at that point, and it didn't appear that I was any closer to finding my way out. Looks like I don't have any other choice. I refuse to end up in the back rooms. I'll have to turn around. I retraced my steps, heading back the way I came and around to the corner. My stomach dropped into my toes the second that I did. Instead of that same and indistinct hallway that I had just walked through, I found myself standing in the kitchen. I glanced around, wide-eyed, trying to make sense of it all. This shouldn't be possible. There was only one way forward and one way back. How did I get here? As my mind worked overtime trying to unravel the predicament that I had found myself in, I caught movement out of my peripheral vision. I snapped my head in its direction, expecting to find some kind of ungodly monstrosity stalking toward me. Instead, I was greeted by the sight of a portly man wearing a chef's uniform. He stared at me as he rolled dough, a thin smile pressed into his lips. I jumped back, shaken at the sight of another person. "Whoa, who are you?" I asked, trying to subdue the quiver in my voice. "Well, shouldn't that be obvious? I'm the head chef. Name's Lucius. Pleasure to make your acquaintance," he said, removing his hat and bowing dramatically. While he greeted me, something strange caught my eye. 2 horns protruded from a tuft of red curls atop Lucius's head. When he put the hat back on, I looked away, a jolt of panic surging through me. "And your name is? It's awfully rude to keep people in a one-sided conversation, you know." "Oh, my bad, I'm sorry. My name's Brandon," I said, offering a nod. "So you're a demon like Jezebel." "Yeah, what's it to ya? Jessie's my little sister, and quit gawking at me like that." "Sorry," I replied, shifting my gaze to the floor. "You're just not what I expected is all." I could feel Lucius glaring at me, his burning stare stinging like a fire poker. "What, because I'm fat? Not all demons have six-pack abs and a baby face like Prince Charming. Some of us get beat with the ugly stick, just like you did. You watch too much anime, buddy. Give that stuff a rest. But I haven't watched. Actually, never mind. I apologize. I muttered, deciding that it would be best to not anger him any further. Lucius's expression softened a little. Don't sweat it, kid. Water under the bridge. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. That's what you're here for, isn't it? A grin inched across his lips as my stomach grumbled again. Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it, I said, shuffling over to the pantry to peruse the selection. My face dropped the second I caught sight of the shelves. The pantry was completely devoid of food, save for a box of ancient-looking saltines. I sighed before grabbing them. I peered inside, and as luck would have it, I was greeted by 3 whole crackers. What the heck, man? You've got a pantry the size of a football stadium, and the only thing you have to eat are these sorry things, I hissed, holding up the sad excuse for a snack. Lucius stopped rolling his dough and frowned. Be grateful for what you get. Master Cromwell didn't have to let you eat here at all, but the errand boy is on a store run now. Check back in an hour or 2 if you want something of substance. My stomach growled loudly enough for Lucius to hear. Or, he said, his eyes lighting up, you could try this dessert that I just whipped up for the master. I baked extra in case any cretins like you slunk in here. Lucius turned and retrieved a tin. He popped it open, and the second that he did, a sweet aroma drifted to my nostrils. The things looked like brownies infused with caramel swirls. I practically floated over to Lucius like a character in a Disney film. Why didn't you mention these in the first place? I asked, taking one from the tin. Must have slipped my mind. A smile plastered across the demon's lips struck me with a lingering sense of unease. It was too wide and his eyes were too eager. What's in these? I asked, biting into the treat. It tasted incredible. It was chewy, more so than I would have expected, and it was unlike anything I had ever eaten. A sweet blend of flavors that I had never experienced before danced across my tongue, leaving me in awe. Oh, you know, the usual ingredients, Lucius said as I continued to chew. Sugar, flour, caramel, hazelberry, clementines. I rushed to the sink and immediately spat into it the second the final word left Lucius's lips. He cackled behind me as I stuck my head under the faucet and gurgled water, desperately trying to wash away any remnants of the baked good. What is wrong with you? Are you trying to make me lose? You should have told me those things were made with clementines. Lucius had stopped laughing. His toothy grin looked more malicious somehow, more sinister. I suddenly felt a nagging sense of fear. For the first time since meeting him, I got the feeling that Lucius might not have good intentions. Take this as a lesson, kid. The entities in this house are not on your side. We ain't here to hold your hand through this, especially not us demons. And as for me personally, I hope you lose. If Master Cromwell is feeling generous, he might just hand your dead body over to me. I've been itching for a chance to cook human flesh. I backed away, careful not to take my eyes off of him. My heart jackhammered in my chest and my eyes grew wide as dinner plates. Lucius had begun to giggle. It was soft at first, barely audible if you weren't listening for it, but it grew louder as I continued to put distance between us. Once he was nearly full on laughing, I turned and sprinted down a different hallway from the one that I had initially taken. Adrenaline surged through me as I ran, my mind racing after what I had just seen. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get away from that lunatic. Eventually, once I was certain that I wasn't being followed, I took a moment to catch my breath and reevaluate. What the heck? I muttered, hands on my knees. What have I gotten myself into? A house full of demons and shifting hallways. This is insane. I suddenly felt a deep hopelessness encompass my entire body. I realized then exactly how powerless I was. I was in a mansion full of otherworldly creatures who were praying for my downfall. The layout of the house could shift at will, and I was running on no food and the minimal amount of sleep that I had managed to get at the jail. Not to mention that I had no way to tell how much time I had left. The odds were stacked against me. That thought clawed to the forefront of my mind as I continued onward. I didn't have a strategy, but I knew that I needed to stay moving. I rounded the corner, full expecting to be greeted by another identical hallway, but that's not what I found. I had somehow managed to circle back to the same living room that Jezebel and I had passed through when I had first entered the house. And as luck would have it, the demoness was sitting in one of the armchairs, sipping a cup of tea. Her eyes followed me as I drew nearer. This time, I was determined not to be so careless. Lucius had proven his point, and I knew that Jezebel couldn't be trusted. Even so, if she was willing to offer me even a little bit of help, it was worth a shot. Hi, I said, tentatively approaching her. Jezebel's glowing eyes remained locked on me like lasers. Hello, David, is it? I mentally facepalmed myself. It's Brandon. Where did you get that from? You never gave me your name when we met. I took a wild guess. You look like a David, so I went with that. I sighed, thinking back on it. She was right, I really couldn't fault her. Fair enough, so there's something that I wanted to ask you. Well, multiple things, actually. Jezebel studied me for a moment as if determining if I was worthy of her presence. Go ahead and ask me anything you'd like, but you may or may not receive an answer. My time is valuable and I don't intend to waste it on silly nonsense. I pursed my lips. Not cheery as ever, I see. So my first question, I really should have thought this earlier, but do you have like a watch or something that I can borrow? I don't have any way to tell time. Jezebel shot me a glare before digging around in her purse. You really should have been more prepared. Going into this blind is such a reckless move, she said, shaking her head. I suppose I can lend you my pocket watch, but only if you promise to return it to me if you successfully complete your trial. My brows furrowed. What do you mean if I successfully complete my trial? Won't you want it back either way? Jezebel grinned at me. As she did, a chill slithered up my spine. Well, yes, but in the event that you lose, it is highly likely that you won't be able to return it to me. My stomach dropped upon hearing that. She had mentioned the possibility of death before, but I hadn't truly taken in the weight of her words. Not until that moment. Good to know, I replied, taking the small golden pocket watch from Jezebel's outstretched palm. So my next question. I just walked down a hallway that made absolutely zero sense. Does the whole house shift randomly like that? I must have walked down the same exact hall 15 freaking times before I ended up here. Before she could answer, a deafening roar erupted from somewhere close. Too close. Dread bubbled in the pit of my stomach. I turned to Jezebel, hoping for some form of reassurance, but unsurprisingly I found none. That same smile was plastered onto her lips and she looked almost excited. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, she said, reveling in my terror, but the time for questions has come to a close. My eyes widened as the sound of pounding footsteps echoed throughout the room. The yeti. I had completely forgotten about it. Without another second of hesitation, I bolted away. I weaved through furniture, nearly colliding with the coffee table, before I found myself needing to make a split-second decision, return to the shifting hallway or try my luck elsewhere. My gut told me that the hallway would be the wrong choice. If the yeti was fast, then it could easily catch up to me, and I would have nowhere to hide. No, I needed another option. I raced around the corner and into the foyer. The ornate staircase that I had passed upon entering seemed to be calling to me, and so I trusted my instincts. I leapt up the steps, 3 at a time, but much to my dismay, the crashing stomps behind me were closing in. And then it happened. The monstrosity appeared in the entryway. It unleashed another ungodly roar the moment it laid eyes on me. I turned to look at it, and I felt my soul leave my body. The yeti was massive. Though it was slightly hunched, its head nearly reached the top of the doorway. Its features were ape-like with notable differences in size and the lack of coloration in its fur. Among its yellowed teeth were 2 of the largest and sharpest canines that I had ever seen, and the look in its orange and radiating eyes told me that it was all too eager to rip me limb from limb and shred my flesh to ribbons with those menacing fangs. I didn't waste any time. I shot up the remainder of the stairs as fast as my legs would carry me. My heart felt as if it would leap from my chest at a moment's notice as I ran. The behemoth was big, yet it was incredibly fast for its size, and it was quickly closing the distance between us. As I reached the top landing, the yeti was so close that I could almost feel its hot breath on the nape of my neck. It swiped at me, its massive claws missing by mere inches. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, and in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to curl into a ball and disappear. I didn't want to die like that, ripped to pieces by some eldritch abomination, while my loved ones were none the wiser. I couldn't do that to them. I couldn't leave them to wonder why I never came home. But it didn't look like I had much of a choice. I was going to meet my end right then and there. With that in mind, I prayed to any deity who would listen, trying to make amends in my final moments. And to my luck, it appeared that my prayers were answered. A door appeared to my right, just feet ahead of me. I used all of my remaining strength to push forward and fling it open. The yeti swiped at me again, but if it made contact, I didn't feel it. The adrenaline surging through my system made sure of that. I made eye contact with my pursuer for a split second as I threw myself into the room and pulled the door shut. It was furious. The thing was already pissed when I had first encountered it, but now it was completely enraged. It knew that its prey was about to escape, and it didn't like that one bit. The second that I slammed the door shut, I flipped the lock and backed up, terrified that it wouldn't hold. I heard muffled pounding like the beast was trying to break the door down, but it didn't so much as shake in its frame. As the adrenaline began to wear off, my brows furrowed. That monstrosity was strong enough to rip the door off its hinges, so why wasn't it? "Why, hello there, and who might you be?" A woman's voice snapped me out of my stupor. I spun around to find that I was in a bedroom, one too melancholy for my liking. As I glanced around, my eyes fell to a girl sitting at a desk. She was clutching a pen, and I could see a handwritten note lying before her. "I take it you're Dalia?" I asked, drinking in her features. The woman was stunning. Long black hair flowed down her back, tapering off around her waist. Radiant blue eyes stood out like sapphires, contrasting her pallid skin. She looked like a doll, like she was made of porcelain, something delicate yet innately beautiful at the same time. Maybe. Who are you?" she replied, quirking an eyebrow. "Oh, right," I stammered, struggling to keep it together. "My name's Brandon. I'm doing the survive for a night and one money thing. Look, do you mind if I stay here for a little bit? The yeti is trying to murder me. And Dalia gave me the once-over before meeting my gaze. I suppose you can keep me company for a bit, but only until that thing outside loses interest." Another loud bang resonated throughout the room as soon as she said that. A chill undulated through me at the sound. While we're on the topic, why isn't it breaking the door down? That thing is strong enough to topple a building if it wants to. Well, that's simple. Cromwell placed a spell over it. I stared at her blankly. So he placed a spell on a single door. And Dalia rolled her eyes. I guess I should have clarified. You don't look that bright. Cromwell didn't put a spell on a random door. He put a spell over the entire house. Didn't you ever stop to think about why the furniture hasn't been demolished yet? Why the wallpaper hasn't been shredded and the chandelier smashed to bits? It's all Cromwell's doing. You'd have better luck cracking a diamond in half with your bare hands than so much as leaving a scratch on anything he owns. I pondered her statement for a moment. If she was telling the truth, then Cromwell was way more powerful than I had thought. After my encounter with Lucius, I was much more wary about trusting anyone, especially when their name was specifically mentioned in the rules, but I felt inclined to believe her. Whether it was her natural beauty or my own naivety, I still don't know. That's incredible, I muttered, still mulling over her words. I don't think it's so great. Actually, I think it sucks. She spat, a sudden fire seeping into her tone. Oh yeah? Why's that? Dalia locked eyes with me, making my heart skip a beat. She was more animated than before, more agitated, and that frightened me. Oh, why, you ask? Because I want to see this place burn. I want to watch flames engulf the entire estate until there's nothing left but a smoldering pile of ash. I hate this house. No, more than that. I hate Alexander Cromwell. I pondered her statement as she mumbled under her breath. I didn't want to set her off any further, but I had to know. You mind going into detail? Just curious. You're the first person that I've come across who hasn't referred to him as master. Dalia took a deep breath and then turned to me, the venom in her voice beginning to fade. Are you sure you want the answer to that? I met her gaze, and for the first time, I felt as if I had found someone who was going to give it to me straight. Someone who wasn't going to lie to me for their own ulterior motives. Yes, I want to know what's going on with this place. I can take it. Dalia nodded. All right, but I warned you. That familiar sense of unease enveloped me like a blanket. Something told me that I had just opened a can of worms that I wouldn't be able to close. Well, for me to really get into why I detest Cromwell so much, you have to understand how I ended up here. I was just like you a few years back. A dumb college kid looking for an opportunity to make a quick buck. Growing up, my family was poor, and I was going to be in a mountain of student loan debt after graduation, even with in-state tuition. So naturally, Cromwell's flyer caught my attention. The money would have gone a long way toward getting me out of the financial hole that I was digging for myself, and the game seemed easy enough. Looking back on it now, it all makes perfect sense. We were never meant to win this thing. That little voice in the back of my head had screamed at me that this was a scam, but I didn't listen, and that cost me everything. She paused for a moment, turning away, before taking a breath and continuing with her story. I was eager when I showed up here. I just knew that I was going to beat the game and that I was going to come out of this $10,000 richer. But obviously fate had other plans. I lost, and this is my punishment. To waste away in this godforsaken place for the rest of my days. I had a family, you know. A mom and dad and younger brother who meant the world to me. And now I'll never see them again. They'll never know what happened to me. Michael's going to grow up without his big sister to watch over him, and the thought of it eats me alive. He'll be turning 12 soon. God, that hurts to think about. I've been stuck here for 6 years, trying and failing to make contact with them. That monster took away everything that I love, all because I failed at his stupid game. A tear trickled down Dalia's cheek. She was slow to wipe it away, her gaze affixed to the wall. My heart shattered upon hearing her story. I couldn't comprehend the amount of anguish that she had suffered over the years. That's horrible. I'm so sorry, I said, fully aware of how hollow my words were. I knew that it was pointless, but it felt better than saying nothing. Dalia turned to me, pursing her lips. I wasn't finished yet. That same vigor from earlier in our conversation had returned tenfold. I was taken aback, but nevertheless, I nodded, motioning for her to continue. I haven't been idly twiddling my thumbs for the past 6 years or wallowing in self-pity. I've been trying to find a way out. Either to break Cromwell's curse binding me to this place, or to contact somebody on the outside to blow this whole thing wide open. I need to tell you what I've found on the off chance that you make it out of here. Brandon, was it? Before I tell you this, can I ask a favor of you? Of course. If I can manage it, I'll do whatever I can to help. I'm not going to ask for anything crazy. I'm not going to beg you to call the FBI or tell everybody that I'm here. Cromwell has his ways to ensure that nobody finds out about this place, so I have no doubt that your attempts would be fruitless. No, I just want you to give a message to my brother, anonymously if possible. His name is Michael Branson. If you can, tell him that Dalia loves him. Will you do that for me? I steeled my expression and nodded. It's the least that I can do. If I make it out of this, you have my word that I'll let him know. The tension in Dalia's frame loosened a bit. Thank you. Now back to what I was saying. Do you remember the neighborhood that you passed through on the way here? Yeah, what about it? Didn't you think it was strange that there were no houses? Just vacant lots? Well, yeah, now that you mention it, I did think it was weird. Well, there's a reason for that. Years ago, one of Cromwell's oddities nearly escaped. A vile, evil thing confined to the basement, called a tianak. It mimics human babies to lure its victims. One of the neighbors heard the noises and reported it to the police, and Cromwell wasn't too happy about that. Though nothing came of it, he realized that if the neighbors caught wind of what was going on inside his mansion, that it could spell the end of him. A single individual is one thing. The whole town catching wind of his antics is another. So he bought up every home in the neighborhood and had them all demolished to keep people away. Wow, I never would have guessed. Is that why you're always writing? Are you trying to get the word out so a large enough crowd sees it? Dalia glanced at the page that she had been working on, and then directed her attention back to me. It used to be. I tried to sneak a note into the mail once, but Cromwell found it. So his response was to place a hex on me. Because of that, anybody who reads my writing will die. That's why it's one of the rules they list off sometimes. Not that I would ever show anyone. Now I mainly just write to pass the time. Nothing else to do in this place. I nodded, glancing up at the ceiling as I processed her words. You said that they mention your writing in the rules sometimes. Does that mean that there's some rules that they're not telling me about? No, fortunately Cromwell hasn't sunk that low yet. The rules are different for everyone. Cromwell has a ridiculous number of entities at his disposal. It's too much trouble to unleash all of them at once, so they take turns. I pondered her statement for a moment. I was beginning to wonder if I had gotten the worst of it, or if there were creatures much worse than the ones that I was pitted against lurking in the basement. Either way, I didn't want to find out. I shoved my hands into my pockets, searching for something to fidget with while I listened. And that's when I felt it. The pocket watch. I had completely forgotten that Jezebel had given it to me. I pulled it out and I checked the time. 1:47 a.m. Just a few more hours. Anyway, wait, where did you get that? Dalia snapped, eyeing the watch. Jezebel gave it to me. She's letting me borrow it because I sort of forgot my phone. In reality, it was still impounded along with my car, but she didn't need to know that. Are you stupid? Why would you accept anything from a demon? Jezebel may come off as unassuming, but she's an evil little thing. If you so much as scratch that thing, this trial will be the least of your worries." Yeah, I didn't really take that into consideration. Maybe I can give it back to her." "Yeah, good luck with that. Like I said, she can't be trusted. Now that you have something of hers, you probably won't be able to find her again. At least, not until... Oh no, you idiot. You never told me that the void was in your set of rules." I turned to the door and my heart plummeted. A thick, dark mass was seeping underneath the frame. I had run out of time. I'm sorry, I completely forgot. I don't know what to do," I muttered, watching as the shapeless entity continued to flood into the room. "I know you don't, idiot. Follow me," Dalia said, grabbing my wrist and yanking me to the opposite corner of her room. A nauseating cocktail of fear and shame swirled in my gut. It was all my fault. In the perceived safety of Dalia's room, I had let the void slip from my mind. And because of my carelessness, I was going to pay the ultimate price. "What are we going to do? Do you have a plan?" "Lucky for you, I do have a plan," Dalia said. She smiled at me, a wicked gleam sparking across her pupils. "I'm going to let this thing eat me, and while it's distracted, you're going to run." My jaw fell open and I stared at her in shock. No, that's not happening. I dragged you into this, so I should be the one to find a way out." "Brandon, just let me do this." I heard a soft crack in her voice as she said that, and she turned away from me momentarily. "You don't know how long these past few years have felt. This house is a prison. I've been slowly losing my sanity in here and I can't take it anymore. This is a blessing for me, really." I watched a tear trickle down her cheek. I could feel my own eyes begin to water, but I hurriedly blinked them dry. I can't. It's my fault, please. There's no time. Go." Dalia shoved me aside and stepped forward. The void was nearly on top of her. It rose like a tidal wave, an impossibly dark, writhing cloud of black towering overhead. Dalia looked at me one last time and she smiled. For the first time since I had met her, she looked at peace, like she had been ready to accept her fate for a long time. "Just keep your promise to me, okay?" And with that, she was swallowed whole. As Dalia disappeared from view, I made a mad dash for the door. I threw it open and stole a glance over my shoulder. The void had consumed her entire being in the blink of an eye, and its focus had shifted back to me. I sprinted down the hall as fast as my legs would carry me. I vaulted myself down the staircase and kept running until I was in a part of the house that I didn't recognize. Only then did I stop to catch my breath. Once I was certain that I was out of danger, a flood of emotions hit me like a freight train. I slumped against the wall and I broke down, unable to contain my tears any longer. Dalia had died because of me, because of my stupidity and inaction. It wasn't fair. I should have been the one to go, but instead, she died in that same dark room that she had been trapped in for the last 6 years. Even if she had been released from her misery, she didn't deserve to lose her life like that. Not without seeing her family again. I don't know how long I sat there. At one point, I remember staring at the wall thinking that I should end it all right then. That all I had to do was fall asleep and take the punishment that I deserved. Whatever Cromwell could dish out, I had earned it. Not just for Dalia, but for the infraction that had landed me in the mansion in the first place. I thought hard about giving up, and I almost did, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. My promise to Dalia rose to the forefront of my mind, squashing any chance of forfeiting. I couldn't break it, not after everything she had sacrificed. With a newfound resolve, I stood up and checked the time. 2:19 a.m. Only 3.5 more hours and I'd be free from that wretched place. I took a step forward, prepared to venture into an unexplored part of the house when I heard it. Once the words met my ears, I froze mid-stride. Come closer. My eyes grew as wide as dinner plates. The voice didn't sound human, rather it sounded snake-like. The way that it drew out the S was unnatural. I should have walked away, but curiosity got the better of me. I cautiously proceeded to the next room, only to find that it was completely empty. The contrast was shocking. Every other room in the house was fully furnished with golden white wallpaper and defined trim. But this was something out of a horror movie. The walls were gray with peeling paint. A dim light bulb hung from a loose socket overhead, and nothing but scattered debris littered the floor. If I hadn't known any better, I would have thought that I had stumbled into a rage room. Come closer. That same voice snapped me back to reality. At the far end of the room sat a pitch-black door that closely resembled the one that Jezebel had led me through at the start of my trial. I crept up to it, hard in my throat with each step. I tentatively put my ear up to the door, straining to listen. I didn't hear the voice anymore, but what I did hear felt much more sinister. A cacophony of muffled grunts and bellows erupted from within. I stepped back and stared. This must have been the basement. I was about to turn back, to leave that place alone and find something else to pass the time, but a fleeting thought pulled me back. What if Cromwell was down there? I wasn't thinking straight. In that moment, I didn't care about the challenge or the $10,000 or even making it out of there alive. Cromwell was a monster and I wanted to make him pay. So against my better judgment, I gripped the tarnished black handle and I opened the door. I was met with a set of stairs and a dim glow that invited me in. I took a deep breath, steeling myself before descending into the unknown. The sounds grew louder as I neared the bottom. Claws against pavement, labored grunts of massive beasts, and strangest of all, footsteps. Human footsteps. I practically threw myself down the stairs, ready to confront the man pulling the strings. But nothing could have prepared me for what I'd see. The dungeon that I found myself in was lined with cages. Some looked like prison cells, while others resembled zoo exhibits. Reinforced glass separating the entities within. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. There must have been dozens. Each step forward felt like a Herculean effort as I struggled to comprehend what I was looking at. Banshees, Wendigos, black-eyed children. All these monstrous creatures that I had assumed were nothing more than myths stood right in front of me, contained in a single cramped room. Come closer, boy. I squinted, trying to make out the source of the voice. That's right. To your left. I turned to the cell closest to me and saw him. The creature who had been calling out to me the entire time. He wasn't some serpentine abomination like I had been picturing. No, he was a man. My brows furrowed and the fear that I felt was temporarily consumed by confusion. The thing who had called out to me was an ordinary guy. Hi there, I said, approaching his cage. Hello, my name is Amaru. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Brandon, the pleasure's all mine. Look, I'm gonna cut to the chase. Why'd you call me down here? The moment that I finished my question, I could have sworn that Amaru's eyes danced with a deep and green shimmer. Well, that's simple. I want to make a deal with you. All right, I'm listening, I replied, folding my arms across my chest. You want to find Cromwell, correct? I stared at him blankly, my mouth agape. That was impossible. He had no way of knowing that unless... Did you just read my mind? Call it an educated guess. You do want that, do you not? Amaru grinned at me, a forked tongue snaking between his lips. Yeah, I do. Perfect. If you free me from my confinement, I'll give you his location. Do we have a deal? I studied his expression, pondering his offer. If I agree to this, how do I know that you're not going to kill me the second that you get out of here? You've got to be pretty dangerous if you're lumped in with this crowd, I said, nodding to the other enclosures. And what reason would I have for that? I'm a herbivore. I narrowed my eyes at him. I didn't believe that for a second, but something compelled me to help him. If I wasn't going to die and it would make things messier for Cromwell, well then I was all for it. Fine, I'll help you, but if you eat me, I don't know, I'll probably come back and haunt you. Where's the key at? Amaru pointed directly behind me. I had failed to notice that there was a key ring hanging on the wall when I had entered. I snatched the keys from their holder and handed them to Amaru, who immediately went to work, jamming each one into the lock. After a handful of attempts, I heard a satisfying click and the door swung open. Ah, freedom. Thank you, my friend, he said, spreading out his arms and taking in a breath of fresh air like it was the best thing he had ever tasted. You're welcome. Now for your end of the bargain. Where's Cromwell? In his office, of course. Up the staircase to your right, end of the hallway. He'll be expecting you. Without another word, Amaru dropped to the ground. His body began to writhe and twist in ways that I never thought possible. The sound of bones snapping and muscles popping resonated throughout the room, drowning out the surrounding moans and roars from the beast. I turned away, too disturbed to watch any longer. When I finally gathered the courage to steal a glance, I was met with the sight of a massive green serpent. It turned to me, its golden eyes radiating with delight, and then it slithered up the stairs and out of view. I took a step back, trying to process what I had just witnessed. I had known that Amaru was some kind of snake person hybrid, but a guy who could turn into an anaconda, well, that was definitely not on my bingo card. Once I gathered my composure, I followed Amaru back up the stairs. I didn't care what kind of mischief he got into. That was Cromwell's problem to deal with. I was still bullheaded and full of rage, ready to confront the man who had caused so much suffering. The only problem was, I didn't have an inkling of an idea of what to say. I emerged from the basement, opting to take the hallway opposite of the one that I had come through. I didn't know if that would lead me to where I needed to go, but I didn't want a chance running into the void again. It may have been slow, but rounding a corner and face planting into that thing would mean certain death. I walked down the hall, hoping to somehow find myself standing in front of the grand staircase, but when I reached the end, I was met with another hallway. No, this can't be happening, not again. I sprinted back the way that I had just come, praying that I would end up back in that disheveled room, but no. I was greeted by the sight of another identical hallway. What is going on? There's two of them? I can't do this, I mumbled, dragging myself onward. At that point, I was hungry, thirsty, sleep-deprived, and running on nothing but anger and adrenaline. Clearly not the recipe for success, but I couldn't give in. Not yet. My heart shattered each time that I rounded another corner. 7 times, 8 times, 9, 10. I was beginning to think that I'd be trapped in that endless maze of hallways until I died of exhaustion. But just like the last time when I was starting to lose all hope of making it out, I stumbled into the exact room that I had been hoping to find. A blanket of relief and confusion hit me like a ton of bricks. How had it known? Was the thing sentient? I didn't give myself time to think about it. I threw myself up the stairs and marched down the corridor. The lights flickered with each step that I took, lending an eerie ambience that sent a chill down my spine. As I walked, I glanced around, praying that some unforeseen monstrosity wouldn't pop out and snatch me up, but I didn't let that stop me. After what felt like an eternity, I found myself standing before an ornate and golden door. My head swam as I raised my fist to knock. Was I really going through with this? What was I even going to say? The reality of how powerless I was finally dawned on me. but I had come too far to turn back. "Brandon, please come in. I've been waiting for you." My breath hitched in my throat. I hadn't even knocked yet. How did he know? My hand trembled as I pushed the door open, unsure of what I would find. When I made eye contact with the man whom I had resented so much, I wanted to tuck my tail and run. Alexander Cromwell was well dressed, and I had assumed someone of his noble standing would be. He donned a sleek, gray suit, and I noticed a pair of shiny gold cufflinks adorning his wrists. In addition to his extravagant clothing, his office space was immaculate. Potted plants lined the right wall, some of which I had never even seen online, let alone in person. A giant fish tank made up the entire wall to my left. Thousands of exotic fish swam lazily within, illuminated by a soft and blue light. Cromwell himself sat in the center of the room behind a mahogany desk. A hand mirror shielded his face from view as he ran a comb through his hair. "Come, take a seat. There's no need to be afraid," he said, finally setting the mirror down. When I drank in his features, I wanted to vomit out of pure terror. Twin horns, black as midnight, protruded from his head, standing out like a sore thumb against his slicked brown hair. A thin, sly smile stretched across his lips, like he knew a secret that he was itching to share. But that's not what unsettled me the most. No, the things that scared me more than anything were his eyes. They radiated an intense shade of red, burning into my psyche like hot coals. I quivered as I pulled out the chair opposite of him and sat down. As I did, Cromwell glanced at the door and it slammed shut. I was in complete awe. I had heard stories about how powerful he was, but witnessing for it myself was something else entirely. "Before you say it, I'll address the elephant in the room. I am a greater demon. Lesser demons like Lucius and Jezebel have limited abilities, but greater demons have raw power unlike any other being on the planet. I sincerely hope that I didn't frighten you." Cromwell's lip curled upward, showcasing a pair of sharp fangs. "Now that we have that out of the way, what brings you to my quarters?" I gulped, feeling the color drain from my face. If his goal was to intimidate me, well, he had done a great job at it. Dalia is dead, but you already knew that, didn't you?" Cromwell's unsettling smile stretched a little bit wider. "Yes, I'm well aware. I've been keeping tabs on you since the moment you entered the front gate. I know about the Yeti, the Void, Amaru, all of it. As much as you would like to believe otherwise, you are completely at my will." Cromwell's stare intensified, and it felt as if the temperature in the room was rising. I thought I was imagining it at first until beads of sweat formed atop my brow. I felt it in every part of my body, an intense, radiating discomfort, like I was stuck in Death Valley with no sunscreen. My head began to throb, and just when I felt as if I was going to pass out, I heard a beeping noise and the sensation faded. "Well, would you look at that? Congratulations, my boy, you survived the trial." Cromwell rifled in his desk and produced a manila envelope and then handed it to me. "It's all there. Feel free to count it if you wish." I was at a loss for words. But I should have had at least another 2 or 3 hours left. How is it already 6 a.m.? "Oh, the shifting hallways. The creature that inhabits them has the ability to affect time. Some emerge with a longer duration in their trial, some with less. It appears that you were on its good side. Now, I must ask that you be on your way. I have important matters to attend to." I nodded, my head still foggy as I stood and slunk to the door. I had so much that I wanted to say, and I hadn't managed to get any of it out. Though I had won the game, I felt like a colossal failure. I shoved my hands in my pockets, preparing to leave when I felt it. The watch. I spun around, facing Cromwell, who had returned to admiring himself in the mirror. "Hey, Jezebel let me borrow this. Can you make sure that it gets back to her?" I took a step toward him, and to my shock, the unthinkable happened. I tripped over my own foot. I watched helplessly as the golden pocket watch tumbled through the air and crashed to the marble floor. I winced, landing beside it, and prayed that the damage wasn't too severe. But to my horror, the watch had landed face down, little shards of glass littering the floor. My heart dropped into my toes, and I knew then that I had screwed up big time. You broke it." I turned to find Jezebel standing in the doorway. A deep frown was etched into her face, and I could see tears welling in her eyes. "I came here to retrieve my watch, and this is what I find. That was a gift from my brother." I felt as if my soul had left my body. Cromwell was staring down at me with that same grin, and Jezebel was almost in tears. She suddenly straightened up and then glowered at me. Her stare was paralyzing. "Come with me, please, Brandon. Apologies, Master Cromwell. Please forgive my outburst." "All is forgiven, my dear. Do with him as you will." I didn't know what she had in store for me, but I wasn't going to disobey. Once the door clicked shut, Jezebel grabbed my wrist and violently yanked me away from Cromwell's office, dragging me down the stairs and into the foyer. It hurt like crazy, but I deserved that at the very least. "Look, Jezebel, I'm sorry. It was an honest mistake. I'll pay for a new one." She locked eyes with me, and I instantly regretted opening my mouth. "You don't understand. That item was extremely valuable to me. In order to repay what you have damaged, I'm giving you two options. 1, I release you from living right here and now. Or 2, once you die, your soul will be mine for 7 years. Then you may pass on to the afterlife. What will it be? Servitude or immediate, agonizing death?" "Oh, come on, there has to be another solution. I can..." "No." Jezebel's voice deepened by 2 octaves and her eyes darkened. The horns on her head seemed to grow, and I could sense a deep-seated rage waiting to be unleashed. "This is your only choice." I emerged from Cromwell's mansion and nearly collapsed onto the ground. I was barely alive, clinging to my sanity by a thread. Jenkins' squad car greeted me in the driveway, along with the smug prick himself leaning against the passenger side door. "You look awful, kid. I'm glad you made it. You got something for me?" I slapped the envelope into his chest and let myself into the backseat of the car. I didn't have the energy to deal with him, and I think he understood that, evidenced by the silence on the way back to the station. That was the last time I saw that place. I got my car back, and I wasn't charged with anything in exchange for the money. It took weeks, but I did manage to keep my promise to Dalia. I used the information in her missing persons articles and word of mouth to find her family. I left a note in their mailbox late one night. I can only hope that it gave them some sort of peace of mind. As for my education, I transferred the next semester for obvious reasons. I didn't think that I'd ever find myself back in that small college town, yet here I am. It's while I'm telling my story after almost 5 years of silence. You see, I have a younger sister. As much as I tried to convince her to go somewhere else, to warn her about the Cromwell estate and the horrors that lurked within, she didn't listen. Julia was reported missing 3 days ago, and I have a feeling that I know who's responsible. That's why I'm heading back to the Cromwell mansion. I don't care if people think that I'm crazy. I won't let him take her. I have no idea how, but I will get my sister back, no matter the cost. Damon McCory, Rain, Big Country Allen, Jerry Ramey, Nelson Asada, Die Screaming, Meat Gasher, Talamagara, Caden Kibler, Justin Foten
massacre.